Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind show. We have got right cracker for this week and we've got a fantastic guest. So let's get straight to it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young at heart. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Hello. What an absolute fantastic show we've got for you this week. And for those of us that have been with us from the very start, we've got an amazing guest joining us. So I've got to bring him in straight away because, you know, he is the OG from the podcast. Mags, welcome back. Great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah. It's amazing to be back on the Rewind where it all started, right? It's great to see you guys again. Lewis, have to say, done an absolutely fantastic job while I've been away, feeling absolutely better than I could ever do, to be honest. So it's been awesome still continuing to listen to you guys every week, but, you know, a little bit sad not being here. So it's great to be back. How are you doing, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you, Mags. Obviously, you're doing a fantastic job over on the Dynasty show. Everyone who hasn't caught it yet needs to go and check that out. But of course, we're missing you here on the Rewind. But, you know, we've got Lewis now, so we've kind of moved on anyway. So, of course, there's actually three of us this week, as well as Mags. So, Lewis and Paul, how are you guys getting on this week?
Doing well. Right as Mag said, you know, how well I've stepped up to replace him. I accidentally just closed the sleeper tab of the draft that we're about to do in a very professional way. I was like, I'll just clean up my tabs while everyone else is talking, and just exited the draft in the first place. So very professional podcaster. Very glad to be back on. I'm very glad to be back with you guys.
Yeah, great to have you back, Lewis. We missed you last week, so glad to have you back with us. And Paul, how are things with you?
Yeah, all good. It's nice to have Mags back where he belongs, you know, before he deserted us. Not that I'm still bitter about that, Mags, but you know, it's good to have you back on a Monday night with us, rolling with the low lights, you know.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you, Mags. And we've got an interesting show tonight. So we're going to do a superflex mock draft with a difference. So this week we've got a starting lineup challenge. So in 8 rounds, you've got to draft your full starting lineup. As it's superflex, you've got to have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 1 flex spot, so obviously that can be any skill position player. So it's going to be quite an interesting one, a little bit different, because I know a lot of people now don't necessarily fill all of their starting spots in the first 8 rounds. So really excited to kind of see how this plays out. So Mags, Paul and Lewis are all going to draft separate teams, and I'm going to be the judge at the end and decide who I feel has drafted the best starting lineup. And of course, what I say goes. So when you lose, Paul, don't be bitter.
I was going to say, we already know I'm coming last, then, don't we? You know?
Well, you never know. You might, you know, do okay. Maybe if you just put yourself on auto, things could go really well for you.
Correct.
Why are you throwing shade at me so far? I tell you what, pick 1, Joe Burrow. Pick 2, Jamal. Pick 3, T. Higgins.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
And round it all out with a bit of Mike Gesicki and you're sorted.
Oh, fire.
Right. Are we feeling ready?
Yep.
Ready.
So we get this thing going. So let's get sharing our sleeper screen. So for those of us on audio, Paul has got the 102, Mags has got the 103, and Lewis has decided to go for the 108. So it's 12-team league. All of the other teams are going to be autoed, and then obviously we'll have a chat through as we go why they've picked the certain players and kind of what we feel they're going to be like this season. So should we get this draft started? Are you ready, Paul?
Always.
Okay, here we go. So, Paul, Patty Mahomes is gone.
Great first choice, by the way. Fantastic from T1 there.
So, who are you going for, Paul, here? I think we might guess, but...
So this is really easy for me. if it's super flex, round one is always QB, unless I'm sort of at the back end of the round. If I can get in the first sort of maybe 6 picks, I'd prefer to have a QB and take one of the elite QBs. Now, the guy I'm going to go for is actually my number 1 QB, and he would be my number 1 overall. And it's a dream that he's fallen to me here at 102, and that is Josh Allen. I just think he is the best QB in this whole what's the word? A whole
In the
sport
NFL?
in the NFL, you know. So he's easy for me. He's finished his QB1 the last couple of years, and it's just slam dunk, really. Nice and easy.
So if you're at the 101, he would have been your choice.
Yes, definitely. Easy pick there at 102, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, Mags, over to you. What are you thinking here at the 103?
I would have taken, if either Mahomes or Allen fell to me, I would have taken them. So I'm going to go against, what I would usually preach in Dynasty, because obviously I'm a big Dynasty guy. So I would normally preach the importance of taking quarterback. And even though this is a super flex, I just think Christian McCaffrey is such a difference maker at that running back position. He finished about 100 points ahead of the running back 2 last year. I'm going to go, especially in this challenge where we have to fill out our teams here, I'm going to make sure I've got a difference maker at running back. And I know that you guys can only take 2 quarterbacks, and I'll just swoop in and take some other ones later. So I'm playing the game a little bit here, to be honest, Hannah. I'm going to go and take Christian McCaffrey, the biggest difference maker in fantasy football right now, the cheat code. So give me Christian McCaffrey.
I like it. Oh, I've been put in the 4 spot, the 5 spot. Lucky me. So what I'll probably do here is just auto. So
This would be funny when Hannah has the best team out of all of us to sort.
I know, and obviously I'm going to decide that I have the best team. That's a really interesting strategy there, though, Mags, and I think that's a great point in that, actually, overall, people can only take 2 QBs, so really only 24 ultimately will go off the board. So even if you're kind of a little bit behind at quarterback, you've kind of really got an advantage there at running back.
And yeah, this applies to like all other things. This is not just specific to this rule set. That is such an important thing. No matter what you're doing, you got to go ahead. You got to read the rules. You got to see what the format is, understand what the scoring is, and then make your decisions based on that. You shouldn't go in and draft the same team for every single league that you're in, because every league, hopefully, will have its own unique quirks and differences.
It's a fantastic point. I think sometimes people forget that and they just go in with the same kind of ideas every time. So, Lewis, you're up at the 108. What are you thinking here?
So I was definitely thinking between 2 players if they made it to me. Lamar Jackson went right before me just because I agree with Mag's point around quarterbacks, but I do think Lamar can be a real difference maker. Definitely wouldn't have gone Stroud. I think he's massively overdrafted here. But a similar sort of tactic to Mag's, that this is only starting 8 players and it's just the starting lineup. I want to look for true difference makers. And so I'm going to go for Tyreek Hill, who I think is probably the right choice here in terms of someone who can finish as the number 1 overall at their position.
And it's come straight back to you. Not many QBs gone off the board between your last couple of picks. Any interest in a QB here, or are you sticking with the skill position?
Well, a quarterback is very tempting looking at who's there. So we can only start 2 wide receivers and then also looking at a flex. I like the idea of just clamping down on that wide receiver market and then potentially looking at the stacks later on with quarterbacks. Jahmyr Gibbs is quite tempting, but I think running back, as Mags has said, after Christian McCaffrey, there's such a massive drop off that I think I can replicate a similar type of talent way later on. Kyler Murray is also quite interesting, but I'll leave him to Paul to stack with Marvin Harrison when he comes back if that happens. I think probably it's between AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson for me here. I think I'm going to go with AJ Brown just because I like that wide receiver pairing of Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown.
Nice. So we'll move back on to...
Oh, both gone.
That's fantastic. I was going to take Kyler Murray only to annoy Paul, so I'm glad that's kind of out of my hands so that I can actually pick who I want to.
So who are you liking here then, Mags? Are you interested in the quarterback position, or are you sticking with skill?
Yeah, this is an interesting one now. Obviously, I've got my running back locked in, which is really, really nice. This is kind of the wide receiver zone here. I think Lewis took the last sort of true like alpha wide receiver here that I'm expecting to like locked in will finish as like a top 10 wide receiver. So I'm not quite gonna reach for there yet. I can just see an excellent opportunity here to snag one of the best quarterbacks for fantasy this year. He was electric last year. I think he'll be really, really good again this year. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take Dak Prescott and be really pleased that he's going to be my quarterback one, unless I can see anything at running back, which I don't really. Yeah, give me Dak Prescott and I'll be happy to lock him in.
Love
Do you know,
that.
I really, really think we talked about this, didn't we, on Friday, Paul? I think Dak is very undervalued this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he performed exceptionally last season. I don't see any reason why he's not going to this season. So I think you've got a pretty good value there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I think so.
I definitely feel like you just sniped me. I was very much looking at Dak to come back to me. I completely disagree with both of your strategies because I'm looking at last year's fantasy finishes at QB and the difference between QB1 and like QB9 is like 130 points. So you may have taken that 100-point advantage for you, Mags, taking Christian McCaffrey, but you've lost it then because you could have had Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott. You could have had two elite QBs. Now in Superflex, I'm all about QBs, so I'm thinking right now I'm going to take the one guy I think could actually finish there or thereabouts. He was in the same sort of tier as sort of Dak Prescott for me, and I think you actually love him, Mags, and that is the Green Bay Packers quarterback, and that's Jordan Love.
Jordan Love.
I'm interested, Paul. What's the difference between like QB9 and QB, 18? Was there a big difference there?
QB9 was 284, QB18 was 239.2. So there's 60 points there.
Yeah.
So 2.5, 3 points a game.
Yeah, I haven't got. Where's the points per game one? So
Well,
yeah,
if it's 50, then it's 2.5, 3 points a game ish.
yeah. So one's 16.7 and 18 is 18.4. So
Yeah, because I think for me, once you get past that elite tier, which realistically, in my opinion, is probably like the top 3 or 4, I would probably put Lamar in there over Stroud. Maybe A-Rich could reach there this season. I actually think there's not like massive amounts in it. So, I think getting Dak, who did finish in, very highly last season in the second round as your first QB, I'm not against that. And I think, again, once I get to like the QB9 range, I'm not pushing to get, a QB at that point because it does level out, a lot.
yeah.
So I get what you're saying about you really want to get QBs, but sometimes I think potentially you're kind of missing out on other skill kind of points. But before we talk about, we can discuss it a little bit more. You've only got 30 seconds left on your pick, so where are you going?
So I was looking at wide receiver. I sort of agree with what Mags was saying. I'm not a big fan of the wide receiver room now. I'm going to play a bit for upside here, and I'm going to take a running back that we know he could finish as the running back one on the season. He's done it before. He could do it again, and that's Jonathan Taylor. I think it is a bit of a. I'm kind of hoping for upside there more than I am anything else. He is a good running back. He is going to score me points. But if he has the season we know he can have, I may have just taken running back one on the season. If Christian McCaffrey gets injured, obviously.
Yeah. I'm thinking somewhere along the same lines here. I can see there's still. It is tempting to go ahead and take tight end here, but I think that.
Bit early for Dalton King-Caid, isn't it?
I think I can just wait for Dalton. So I'll wait a little bit for him. I think people are under a sort of misconception at the minute that tight end 1 automatically equals the massive Travis Kelce numbers that we've seen in the past, and it's just not true. That it's like Travis Kelce sort of like a special talent there. Just because you're tight end 1 overall doesn't mean that you're the same. That Kelce was equivalent to like a wide receiver 5 or whatever. It's much closer to like wide receiver 14, 15 that we've seen out of Sam Laporta last year. So I'm not going to pull the trigger there. I'm just going to go for what seems to me like an absolute obvious choice for this year. I know it doesn't always translate moving on to new teams, but Derrick Henry plus Baltimore Ravens equals fantasy gold. Surely. I'll be shocked if it doesn't.
Prepare to be shocked.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree though. Like they say they're not going to limit his touches, which is going to be the reason that he's not going to do so well, right? But Lamar's in there, who's means that the defense have to kind of, account for him. Then, apart from injury, realistically, what do we think? What is going to limit him?
Line as well, right? Yeah. Will that be the best offensive line he's ever played with?
Yeah.
Although the interesting thing is actually their offensive line is like probably the worst it's been for a little while. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not quite as good as it has been the last few years. So that's the only interesting thing. But like you say, I'm sure that the terrible ones that he's had with the Titans, this is probably a complete dream there. So a couple of tight ends have now gone off the board, Kelce and Sam Laporta. Where are you thinking of going here now, Lewis?
So there's a few quarterbacks that I like, and looking at the board, everyone behind me, 2 of the teams only have 1 quarterback, 2 of the teams have no quarterbacks. But I'd quite like to push to see if I can get the Dolphins stack with Tyreek, because to me, Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Justin Herbert to Jared Goff, all around this range, they're all quite similar. So I'm actually going to reach a little bit. And if we're going purely for upside, which is how I'm drafting, I'm going to go for a bit of a strange one here. Not a player I've drafted a lot at, but for this challenge, I'm going to go with Devon Achane, who I think potentially could have the upside to finish quite high up. 2 has just gone.
It's interesting. Because you made that point, didn't you? Loads of them haven't got QBs, but then you're like, I'm going to risk it. And I guess that's the risk you take, isn't it? When you kind of know people want them.
Probably shouldn't have. I might go pretty zero QB and see how that team ends up working out. So I think what I'm going to then do here, because there's lots of running backs who are sort of fine and lots of wide receivers who are sort of fine. But I don't like the idea of starting off with Jared Goff. So I think what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go with this upside shout. Again, I'm going to dip a little bit down the board, and I'm going to start off with my QB1 as Jaden Daniels.
Oh, nice.
This team could explode. Like, this team could be... It's got a pretty low floor, but the ceiling is pretty high.
Mm-hmm. And this is, isn't it? It's boom bust, right? Isn't it? So it's either going to be fantastic and you'll win the league, or you'll finish at the bottom. I don't think there's going to be much in between. But I do certainly think this is what we were talking about last week a little bit, wasn't it, Paul? That ultimately, particularly in these like charity drafts, high stakes, lots of teams in it. That's the kind of way you need to play. It's do or die, boom or bust kind of thing. Otherwise, you're just not going to get anywhere. So I think sometimes these are fun, teams to draft, and ultimately, you're either going to be last or first.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mag, so far you've got CMC, Dak Prescott, and Derrick Henry. So you've filled your 2 kind of running back spots that you have to fill, and you've got 1 QB there. Quite a few of the wide receivers have started to come off. Obviously, a lot of the QBs have gone. Still quite a few of the tight ends around. What are you kind of thinking?
I was really hoping that Michael Pittman Jr. or Mike Evans were going to come and fall to me, but not quite, unfortunately. So in a slight pickle now because, again, I just feel like the value maybe isn't quite there for wide receiver for this season, even though I do like guys like DJ Moore and Jalen Waddle and Nico Collins even, and Deebo Samuel, all these guys who are right up at the top of ADP. They're also in sort of semi-crowded back rooms, so a guy like Malik Neighbors does actually stand out as being someone who could come in and get a lot of targets, but I can just see someone here who I think is way down the ADP. I'm going to go actually fill my flex spot now, believe it or not. And I'm going to take Alvin Kamara and put him in my flex spot, who I think is way down in ADP. He should be far, far higher than that. He's a guy that's going to finish comfortably top 6 RB, I think, this season.
That is a running back room that is going to absolutely smash in 2018.
Yeah, I love it, right?
That whole draft is like a 2018 wet dream, like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Todd Gurley is my next pick, spoiler.
Oh,
Antonio Brown might be out there somewhere.
So what makes you pick Kamara over players like Pacheco, Rashad White's up there in ADP, James Cook, Kenneth Walker, like Joe Mixon, he's going to be the bell cow in Houston.
Yeah. Mixon was the other guy. Pacheco, I mean, I'm, you know me, a big Chiefs fan. It makes no sense why Isaiah Pacheco would be drafted ahead of Alvin Kamara this year. Kamara, we remember he missed a bit of time last year, right? And he came in and he was still on points per game, way up at the top in terms of running back finishes. Then I think he's going to get a ton of catches. I think they've also talked about using him more in the running game. It just seems to me that if he's a guy that can come in and rush for 1,000 yards, he's going to get the catches. I think he's going to finish as a top 6 running back, and getting them in the 4th round is great.
Interesting. Okay, Paul, you've got Josh Allen, John Love. So you filled out your QB room and you've got one running back, Jonathan Taylor. So where are you looking at this point?
I'm going to go to the wide receiver room. I feel like all the running backs are a bit of a reach now. So I'm going to go to the wide receiver room and I'm going to go to the guy who, again, he's sort of battling for that number 1 spot in the 49ers team, and that's Deebo Samuel, and he gives you that sort of, he can rush the ball as well. So I like Deebo Samuel, and I feel like if he hits, you know, he can be a phenomenal player. Really like him, to be fair.
So between your last pick, Deebo, and this next one, Jared Goff goes off the board, and so does Mark Andrews. So 3rd tight end off the board now. So what are you liking here?
So I'm actually liking tight end, and it's pretty obvious who I'm going to go for at tight end here. And you're all looking at it going, oh yeah, he's such a homer. But no, I'm going to go for Dalton King-Caid.
I was going to say,
I
you're going to snipe Mags.
I wouldn't do that to you, Mags, because he's garbage. So I'm going to go for Trey McBride from the Arizona Cardinals. I think, you know, with what you said earlier, Mags, I think everyone is wanting tight ends to be what Travis Kelce was a couple of years ago, and I think everyone is getting a bit OTT with them as such. But actually, I do think an elite tight end, if you can get one of sort of them top 6 tight ends, I think that is something that can help your team win. You know, I think they can be a difference maker in your team. So I do like, I still like to get one of them early tight ends. And the way that this draft is going and the way that computers taking these things, if you don't take one now, you're not going to get one, you know? So you better get Dalton King-Caid pretty soon.
I have always been out of an elite tight end. I have to say, it's just never really been a massive thing for me, just because I've never liked the price. But now that they've all kind of come down in price, I'm well in, you know, at this point. And I think, like you say, there's like 6 or 7 there that I think could quite easily finish as the tight end one if things break right for them. So I'm enjoying drafting a lot of these guys this year. So, Mags, is this an auto pick for you, or are you going elsewhere?
Yeah, this is the guy that will finish as tight end one, Hannah. Let me tell you that. It's the guy that is the number 1 receiving option at the Buffalo Bills. Not a huge amount of competition there. I think he's going to get used a ton. Sort of akin to what Travis Kelce was like with Patrick Mahomes. I think
Oh
he
my
had a
God.
really solid first season. He will be tight end 1 overall this year in
Can I just
fantasy.
ask a question?
It's the one and only Dalton King-Caid. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask a question? Have you genuinely just compared Dalton King-Caid to Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce?
I know Josh Allen's nowhere close to Pat Mahomes, but it was a thing I was willing to make.
I can't even talk to you, Max. You know what I mean? You just, I don't know.
I got Travis Kelce jersey right here. Look,
I don't know what he does for you, because me and Hannah were talking about him last week on the show, and there was weeks where he scored you 0 or 0.7 and stuff like that, and you're like, this guy's going to finish as the tight end 1. What are you seeing that we're not seeing?
I'm seeing almost a 50% target share that has gone missing from the Buffalo Bills. 50% of all, not even targets, all throws Josh Allen made, 50% plus of those are now off the team. It's got to go somewhere. And I think a lot of it's going to go to King-Caid.
Dawson Knox?
No.
Can you imagine this scenario of Dawson Knox finishing as a tight end 1 next year in all 4 fantasy forms? Like,
Dawson Creek has more chance of finishing as tight end 1.
Dawson Knox finishes as tight end 1, and the dynasty hot seat ceased to exist. You know,
I would have to pack it in, right? If Drake London finishes wide receiver 1 and Dawson Knox is tight end 1, I would have to pack it in.
Okay, so back on to Lewis. Lewis, you've got Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Devon Achane, and Jane Daniels. Are you feeling the pressure at tight end, or are you going to ride it out a little bit longer and go for someone else?
Tight end doesn't bother me at all, because the lowest I can get is the tight end 8, and after the elite ones have gone, it doesn't really bother me. There's only 2 more left to go. I'm actually going to go with James Cook here, which is a very interesting one, given obviously what Mags is talking about in terms of the target situation in Buffalo. And to me, James Cook can be a huge benefactor of that. They've brought in a running back who's much better on the ground as well. So actually, James Cook, I think, could see some work out of the slot. I think he's a really interesting option. So he's who I went with. I was hoping one of those 2 quarterbacks would come back, but they haven't, and that's fine. At the next pick, I think definitely it's worth looking. And so I've gone pure upside on mine, right? And when I'm looking across at all of the varying players who are available, I don't need to take tight end, because there are only 3 or maybe 4 teams, or 3 or 4 teams in the league that don't have. So I'm going to end up with a solid tight end. That's completely fine. I know there's a fair amount that don't have, but I can take,
7.
Yeah, but Pitts, Ingram, Kittle, I know you hate him, but Bowers, that's all going to be roughly the same range. When I'm looking purely at upside here, it's between 2 players. One of them being T. Higgins, although I think the upside is slightly capped just by being on the same offense as Jamar Chase. And the other one, and this isn't a player I've been hugely into, but the clear number 1 receiving option on his team for a quarterback that likes to throw it down the field. If my team is purely upside based, I'm going to go with George Pickens here.
Nice.
Interesting. So what made you pick George Pickens? It was purely for the kind of long ball receptions over someone like Zay Flowers or like Amari Cooper, who's going to be number 1 on his team. I know we don't necessarily like Voldemort, Deshaun Watson, but
it's for being so clearly the alpha and target leader that if my team, which seems to be the way that I've built it, is purely based around upside, that if all of these smash, they have sort of top 5, top 10 potential, then I think George Pickens it sits on that list. Like, obviously he has a lower floor than I would like, and if I was drafting slightly differently, I probably wouldn't take him all that often. But with the players going around there, T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Christian Kirk's just gone, I think George Pickens has a higher upside than any of them.
Yeah, I get your point. I'm not a Pickens fan personally, but I can see where you're coming from. So Mags, you have completed the tight end and the running back room. So really your options now are wide receiver or quarterback. So looking at QBs, you've got Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, Deshaun Watson, JJ McCarthy, Geno, Will Levis, Derek Carr. And then obviously at wide receiver, we're looking at Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Tank Dell, Terry McLaurin, Roma Dunze, Hollywood Brown. Anyone take your fancy?
Well, just looking at the board, I know that Paul and Team 1 can't take a quarterback in these rules, so I'm not going to take one now. I can just wait until it swings around for me. So I'm definitely going to go wide receiver here. The one I want is actually a little bit further down in ADP, so it would be a bit risky, but I'm trying to think, could I just wait until it comes all the way back around to me again? Perhaps. I think just with the amount of receivers that have gone off the board, I think I can. So what I might do is risk that I can get this guy as my wide receiver 2 and go for super solid, super reliable, really consistent last year. Man, he is on a new team, but I still think Keenan Allen's going to get it done at the Chicago Bears. I'm gonna put in Keenan Allen. I think he's going to get a ton of targets with a rookie quarterback. It's a safe option. Yeah, I think he's going to do just fine.
Yeah, I really like Keenan Allen at his price this year. So, Paul, no QBs for you, no tight ends because you've already got those. So, really looking at wide receiver or running back here with this pick. So, which position are you going to go this time?
So, kind of similar to Mags, I'm looking at wide receiver and running back, but Team 1 haven't got a wide receiver yet. So, and they got 2 running backs. So, I'm going to go to the wide receiver pool. I was tying between 2 wide receivers, one of them being Keenan Allen. I do like Keenan Allen this year. He is very reliable and he does seem to show up every year. The other guy that I'm looking at, there is another one that I can see further down that I quite happily have, but I'm looking at Amari Cooper. Everyone sort of he does fall down boards, but at the end of the day, he is the number 1 receiver at Cleveland Browns. They do like to throw the ball. He will get many targets. He'll get many receptions, and he is a very good wide receiver. So, for me, it's Amari Cooper, and that gives me I'm happy with him as my wide receiver 2 on my team.
Yeah, I think that was a good pick there because Terry McLaurin and Tank Dell go off the board. So what are we thinking now at this one?
So again, like I've tried to play the board, so I still need a running back and I still need a flex position. So I'm going to go back to the running backs because I'd rather have, when it comes back to my last pick, I'd rather have to be able to pick from both positions than have to take a running back because team 4 haven't got a running back yet. Team 6 have got 1 running back. Team 7 have got 1 running back. Team 10 haven't got a running back. So to me, I'm going to go to the running back room, lock that in now. I think I was sort of down on this guy this year, but now that he's had his contract extension, as we spoke about last week, I think that kind of tells me where the New England Patriots are with Ramondre Stevenson. I think they're going to use him a lot more. I'm intrigued to see how it works out for him. And if I can get him as my running back too, I'm quite happy with that at this point. When you look at who's on the board, I think most of these players that are there now are split backfields and they're not going to see much ball. And I think he could be somebody that shines above the rest of them, if I'm honest.
Yes. No, I totally get it. And we talked about this contract extension, didn't we? And how we thought that probably means that he's in their plans moving forward. So probably will get some decent work. So what about you now, Mags? You have to go to the quarterback or wide receiver well at this point. Which are you thinking here?
I'll go ahead and take my QB here. He's not very exciting, but I still think people forget Baker Mayfield was quarterback 10 last year. And I think that's not really appreciated as much as it should be. I think he had a really, really solid year. I expect him to continue that. He's got great weapons around him. I think that he'll have a super solid year. Maybe 10 is his ceiling, but as a quarterback 2, if I can get a quarterback 1 as my quarterback 2, if that makes sense, that is absolutely brilliant for my team, especially in this round. So it's not a fun pick. It's not an exciting pick, but it's still a good pick, I think. So I'll get Baker Mayfield locked in as my second quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you're drafting him as the QB 20, so I think he's definitely going to outperform his ADP.
Yeah.
There, and like you say, you've got Dak, who's kind of anchoring that QB room. So I wouldn't be against Mayfield at this stage. So we're back on to you, Lewis. Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Devon Achane, Jane Daniels, James Cook, George Pickens. Again, actually, wide receiver you cannot take at this point, but you're pretty open to any other position. Or you can't take running backs because you're filled out and your flex is full.
Yeah.
So it's tight end or QB, isn't it, at this point?
Yeah, and Baker or Rogers were probably who I was looking at. Definitely looking at. So yeah, definitely pushing quarterback hasn't worked out too well for me, but that's why you do these and you live and you learn. I think like purely in terms of upside, there is one quarterback left on the board that I don't draft very often, but in terms of upside, I think is clearly ahead of everyone else on the board. And I should be able to get a nice little stack with him on the way back with the tight end. This is someone that I don't like drafting. But this isn't a real league, so I can do it here. There is upside to Deshaun Watson in ways that there aren't with lots of other players around this range. Would it surprise anyone if he finishes as a QB 30? No. Would it surprise anyone if he finishes as a QB 8? Also no. With players like Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, like even like a Justin Herbert or a Tua, he does have the potential to finish along that range. This was a guy who was, an established QB1 a few years ago. That's as much as I'm willing to talk up Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I mean, this has not gone well for you, has it, Lewis? Because David Njoku's gone off the board, which is, it's unfortunate, isn't it?
I think Paul is secretly drafting as all the other teams and just sniping Lewis at every opportunity.
The worry for me is that I intentionally picked down the other end of the board to you guys. So for context, Mags picked first. He picked the 103. Paul immediately picked going next to him. And I went down the other end. And obviously the auto pick has sort of screwed me a little bit with 4 of the tight ends going off the board there. When you look at the rest of the options available, it's not particularly fun reading. TJ Hawkinson, I don't like drafting here because I don't think he's going to start the season healthy, obviously with a big injury last season. Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet. Do I just take K. Dalton just because I know Hannah is the one picking?
K. Dalton winning at life.
Hannah is the one picking the results. I generally tend to take tight end a little earlier than this. I would have massively preferred either Kittle or Njoku, although I wouldn't have taken Kittle because I know Hannah hates George Kittle. I'm probably going with Dallas Goedert around this sort of range. I think he probably, it gives you a nice sort of team stack and without the quarterback with AJ Brown, but I don't feel good about it.
Yeah, I'm a bit not concerned about Dallas Goedert, but I'm not as convinced about him this year. I'm worried he's not going to get a lot of opportunities, and he's going to be highly touchdown dependent, I think. I think you made just a tiny error there, Lewis, because actually all of the teams to your right already had QBs.
Yeah.
So what you should have probably done is gone Njoku and then
Watson.
Finished up. Yeah. But I think we all do it, don't we? We focus on, what do I need? What shall I get? And sometimes we forget to just look at what has everyone else got, kind of thing. But hey, it still looks like a pretty good team. We'll recap it in a minute once both Mags and Paul are finished. So Mags, wide receiver is your need here. So who is your target?
This is kind of the opposite of Lewis here. I mentioned a wide receiver a while ago when I took Keenan Allen, and 4 wide receivers have gone off the board since then, which is a little bit mad. So really, really pleased that's got back to me. And also was part of the reason why I took Baker Mayfield, because I knew I wanted to get Chris Godwin here because he's moving back into the slot at Tampa Bay. So I think that's a really, really nice stack to have at the very end.
I was just wondering which Chiefs wide receiver it was going to be. I was wondering whether it was going to be. I was wondering, is it Hollywood Brown? Is it Xavier Worthy? Does he still like Rishi Rice without a suspension announced yet? And I'm completely wrong.
I thought about it. I'm not gonna lie.
Again, people are really down on Godwin this year.
Don't get it.
Yeah, I think he's a good player, and I think he struggled, didn't he, coming back from that injury? And I think people kind of went off him a little bit. And Mike Evans had a great season last season, and I think him actually going back to where the position in which he plays, kind of at his best, is probably going to bring him back onto the radar. And I think you could get some good value from him this season.
He was, I think he was wide receiver 2 overall last time he played in the slot, right?
Yeah, I mean, he did a fantastic job. So let's hope he does that again for you in this one.
Yeah.
So then, Paul, last pick. So what we're looking at here. So this is your flex position. So you've got a little bit of flexibility here. Are you wanting to go for a running back, or are you going for a wide receiver?
Well, I was going to go for Chris Godwin, and I immediately went at 102 because I was like, I can toy with Mags and snipe him on everyone. And he sniped me on Keenan Allen and Chris Godwin now. So I take back my decision of going here. Chris Godwin, I had a couple of people that I wanted. I think what Lewis mentioned about the Kansas City wide receivers, which one do you want? Because you do want one of them, but you don't know which one. So I'm the same with Green Bay. But because I got Jordan Love, I'm going to go for a Green Bay wide receiver, and it's a guy I think could be the number 1 wide receiver there, and that is Jaden Reed.
Love that.
You picked the wrong receiver, but that's fine.
Who's what? Christian Watson?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Christian Watson. If he says healthy, I think he's unbelievably talented.
Why did we invite him on our show?
We dumped him ages ago, Paul. I don't know why you asked him back.
I know.
I think that Green Bay is going to be really interesting this season, and like Mags says, I think it could be anyone in my opinion, and I think potentially each week we're going to see someone different get their kind of targets and touchdowns. So I could imagine them all kind of eating into each other. So I'm a bit nervous about drafting Jaden Reed so much kind of higher than everyone else, because I'm not totally convinced that he's going to separate himself so much more than the rest. But it'll be interesting to see how things play out. So everybody has now completed their draft. Paul, you got Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Jonathan Taylor, Deebo Samuel, Trey McBride, Amari Cooper, Ramondre Stevenson, and then Jaden Reed. Mags from the 103. You had CMC, Dak Prescott, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Dalton King-Caid, Keenan Allen, Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin, and then obviously
43.
And then from the 8th slot, Lewis, you got Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Devon Achane, Jaden Daniels, James Cook, George Pickens, Deshaun Watson, and Dallas Goedert. This is a tough one, guys, because there's
tell us your auto pick team as well, though, Hannah. How did you do?
Well, I think mine's all right. So my auto pick team was CJ Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., Travis Kelce, Trevor Lawrence, Rashad White, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, and Roma Dunze. Do you know, I wouldn't hate that from my list.
That's good. That's a really nice team.
I know. Yeah. Is it awful to say that that's my favourite?
I think it puts us all to shame a little bit that I actually looked at it and thought, do you know what? I actually really like Hannah's also drafted team. I think that one's actually really nice.
Do you know what?
I'm going to take that over mine.
If CJ Stroud would have been replaced with Lamar Jackson, I think I'd have been all in on it as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which I think you would have done if you were drafting that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have left Lamar on the board there. I would have switched those. I totally agree. Do you know what? I love the way that everyone's gone for a different strategy. So, Paul, you've gone for the early quarterbacks. Mags, you've gone for the elite running backs. And then, obviously, Lewis, you've gone for the elite wide receivers. So I really like that you've gone for all different strategies. I like everyone's kind of beginning of the draft. And then there's a few picks for everyone that I'm not as keen on. But my winner...
The room looks The room looks so tense. Like looking at Mag's, Paul, and my faces, I didn't know that I cared that much about this, and I don't think my team's great, but I want to win it now.
This is tough, but do you know what? On the whole, I do have to say I think I like Mags is the best.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yes.
So,
Fantastic.
you know,
Thank
you
you,
have
Hannah.
to say that to the guest.
That's
I can't believe we both put £1,000 on this.
Can we split it?
No, you put in £1,000 as well, even though you had no chance of winning it.
So I'd be interested to know, like, what do you guys think? How did you like your teams? Is there something that you would have done differently? Like, should we start with you, Paul? What were your thoughts on that draft? Did you like it? Would you have changed it?
It's difficult because I think there are things that I'd like to change. I think I'd have preferred a sort of a better wide receiver room, if I'm honest. But I like the cost of getting a better wide receiver room would have been a worse QB room. But then I suppose if I could have, say, I don't know, maybe chained out Jordan Love and gone for something like Chris Olave and at that pick, and then maybe got Jared Goff where Deebo Samuel was, maybe I'd prefer that one. But I don't know. I kind of like the way this draft. I actually really like my team, to be honest.
Yeah, I do think more and more I'm kind of moving away from quarterback in rounds 1 and 2, because like we were talking about earlier, the elites, less so last season actually, but generally the elites will separate themselves a little bit. And then I find it gets all quite murky in the middle. So whether you're picking like the QB9 or the QB20, there's not like enough in it for me to miss out on a skill position player in round 2. That's my kind of personal thoughts there. I mean, Lewis, Mags, you might have different thoughts to me on that, but obviously you guys also didn't go that strategy. Mags,
can I just say something?
You're going to defend yourself now, Paul?
No. So I'm currently on the Fantasy Pros ADP from 2019. Mag's whole team is in the top 58. Apart from
that's how good Dalton King-Caid is. They put him in college. They ranked him in the fantasy.
Dalton King-Caid and Dak Prescott, but this is a 1 QB. So you've got Baker Mayfield at 54, QB 4. Yep. You've got Chris Godwin at 50, wide receiver 20. You've got Keenan Allen Derrick Henry then at 36, running back 19. You've got Keenan Allen at 26, wide receiver 11. And then you go all the way up to the top where you've got Alvin Kamara as running back 3 and Christian McCaffrey as running back 2.
Bargain.
Who's the running back 1? Is that Saquon?
Saquon.
Yeah.
But I just love the fact that apart from Dak Prescott and Dalton King-Caid, your whole team is in the top 50 ADP of 2019.
Do you guys think that the amount of people that play Dynasty now, that subconsciously it filters into redraft as well, where people don't take older guys? Because I see that.
100%.
I'm intrigued to see where Dak was in this.
I definitely think all the time you see that mentality of looking for the next breakout player rather than looking for the established player. I think definitely at the wide receiver position, I think more so than anywhere else, we're looking for who can be the next guy to break through. And then you end up with, we've spoken quite a lot about Mike Evans, about the incredible value that you get on him here when all he does is finish as a wide receiver 1. But he still goes sort of towards, I mean, he went here in the 4th round. I know it's a super flex, but normally towards the back of the 2nd, midway through the 3rd.
Yeah, I do think the earlier you draft as well, in the off season, the more you see it. People have literally come off their rookie drafts and they're going straight in and they're like, oh, rookies, young players, breakouts, and they kind of forget these kind of veterans. And I think there's a balance to be had, isn't there, really? You want particularly in a managed league, I do think you want both a floor and a ceiling. You know, you need some players that are going to reliably put up points for you, particularly if you've got quite a few rookies on your roster, because ultimately, typically at the start of the season, they just don't get going straight away, you know, and you're kind of keeping them for the second half of the season and the playoffs. So you need players that are going to put up some points so you can at least be competitive in the early weeks while your rookies get going, because if you lose all of your kind of matchups at the start of the season and you're going in at 6-0 or something ridiculous, then you're really going to you're fighting against the tide to try and then make the playoffs. Whereas if you can kind of keep yourself swimming along and getting a few wins, you know, getting in there at 3-3 or something like that, and then your rookies get going and you really start to progress and win, you know, it's a big difference. And I think sometimes people forget that. They draft all of these young rookies and young players, and they don't have any kind of firepower for the beginning of the season, and then they dig themselves into a hole and they just can't get out of it to get into the playoffs. And then ultimately in week 17, they would have won the whole thing, but they never made it to the playoffs originally.
That's the only thing that puts me off about your team on this, Hannah, is you've got two rookie wide receivers.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing. If I was to have that team, the only thing I would have, not just Lamar Jackson instead of CJ Stroud, because I think that's absolutely insane. Why anyone would do that is beyond me. I know it's computer, but I want Marvin Harrison Jr., but I don't think my wide receiver 2, if I went for my wide receiver 2, wouldn't be another rookie, because as we know, these rookie wide receivers are getting better and they are hitting the ground running, but I don't think Odunze is going to be a wide receiver 2 value straight away. I think he can be towards the end of the season, but at the start of the season, I think I'd prefer maybe instead of like Rashad White, you'd have gone for Jalen Waddle there or something like that and sort of secured that. I know it was computer and he didn't draft it, but I think that's the only thing I'd do about that team, to be honest. I think the rest of us haven't really got much rookies in there.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I think I would have been happy with Rome as my wide receiver 3, but less keen as my wide receiver 2. Just quickly, Mags, in terms of your roster, how kind of concerned are you about this kind of age cliff, particularly, you know, with players like Derrick Henry and Kamara? Even Keenan Allen, like, do you think there are risks that ultimately they could be on the downward trajectory at this stage, and maybe you've kind of missed their peak and your team could struggle if they struggle?
Yeah, I think especially with taking running back early, if your running backs are going to struggle, then you're kind of digging your hole a little bit. But then I find running backs are easier to replace on the waiver wire than wide receivers as well. Like, you can find the running back that's carving out a role, so they're a bit easier to find as a replacement compared to wide receivers that are kind of little to none that you, unless you get lucky with like a Puka or something like that, right? It doesn't often happen that way. So yeah, that is definitely a concern. I just think, like I said, with drafting Derrick Henry, it just makes so much sense to me that he will do really, really well. And same with Kamara as well. It just all adds up in my head. Keenan Allen's the one that I'm like, because of that crowded room. But I just didn't really like the other options available there. I think he was the best option available. And that's kind of what happens whenever you wait that long to take your wide receiver 1. You're sort of left with those kind of options like Keenan Allen there. The only thing I would really change is I would have taken King-Caid 2 rounds earlier, put some respect on his name like he deserves.
I'm really excited to see you drafting in Scott Fishbowl this year, Mags, because tight end's got quite a high premium, and I can see you. I don't know what position you've got, but I'm pretty sure he'll be your first pick, and you'll be slamming that sticker on the board.
I'm going to put my fist through the board this time. I almost did it last year. It's going the whole way through this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And this is the thing, isn't it? Because ultimately, if running backs are easily replaceable on the waiver wire, obviously, and this is a theoretical because this league is not going to be real, then maybe actually you don't need to spend as much draft capital on drafting all 3 of them really highly, and actually maybe your wide receiver 1 could be a bit of better quality, and then you could balance it out. You know? But you know, it's really, I love the way that actually our strategies are different, because it just gives us something to talk about, isn't it? And, you know, a lot of it will depend on how the draft falls to you, right? Where are the values? You know, where do you feel, you know, you're going to get the upside, or the guy that's undervalued And so everyone's strategies will be different. And, if we did this again, I'm sure everybody's strategies again would be different. So Lewis, obviously you went for kind of the upside team here. And your obviously strategy was to go for a wide receiver early. So you took Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown. And then obviously, you went kind of all the rest of your players at that point. So you waited quite late at QB. We saw that you got sniped quite a few times for the QBs that you wanted. Are you happy with your team? For me personally, this is kind of my favorite type of strategy. I like to get a few wide receivers in early and then kind of figure everything else out. Although in Superflex, it can be a challenge to kind of catch up with your quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think I am perfectly happy with the first 4 picks. I really like, especially looking at upside. Jaden Daniels is the last quarterback that I'm happy with as my quarterback 1. I think then I probably should have reached slightly more on the players that I wanted. So if I'd taken a Cousins or a Stafford, that would have enabled me to get an RB2 that I was perfectly happy with, as opposed to James Cook and then another wide receiver or someone else down the board as a flex. Obviously, the mistake later on, and it annoyed me because I was so hot on early on looking at the board behind me to figure out what else I needed, and then just forgot for that last pick, which obviously shot me in the foot a little bit. But yeah, I was really happy with the first 4 picks, and then I think it's always a real question, especially when it comes to stacks. So when it was the Tua stack that I was looking at, of reaching, because you want to make sure you get it locked in, but you don't want to sacrifice value on your team. And actually, am I happier with Devon, Achan, and Jaden Daniels than I would have been with Tua, and then the next running back to go after mine was Kamara? Probably happier this way round than if I'd pushed the stack a bit too early. So yeah, happy with the way the first half of the draft went. I think later down the board is when you should be happier to kind of attack those players that you're really looking to secure, because you're missing out on less value from reaching a little bit in the 5th round as opposed to in the 3rd.
Yeah, and this is it. And I know, like in best ball, there's been quite a few studies that say that actually reaching for your stack and foregoing ADP value is more of a negative EV strategy. So it means that you're winning less than if you actually just take the value and let the board come to you a little bit.
Yeah.
So I agree, like the 2v2 that you mentioned, Chan and Daniels versus Tua and potentially Kamara, I would take the players that you took every time. And so I think sometimes people push it, they're like, I've got to stack, I must get this player, 1 round above, ADP. And then you're kind of foregoing a lot of value in all of the other positions. Yeah. I think people kind of forget that. And sometimes just stepping back and saying, it's okay if I don't get the stack, I'm going to get good players, from other positions, or, good quality players. And I think just kind of foregoing that a little bit and realizing it's not the end of the world if you can't stack on every team, particularly in these 12 team leagues, these smaller team leagues. I think stacking is much less important than in these, larger field contests where you're trying to really separate, from so many teams, and a lot of them will be so similar that all these very small margins, are big deals. Whereas in a 12 team league, you don't have such small margins. You've got more kind of things to play with than, in these bigger field tournaments. So I agree. I think stacking, whilst fun and important, is probably less important in these general 12 team leagues. I think we're pretty much finished, but Mags, I will give you the last say. Anything you would like to add? And if not, please tell everyone where they can find you now they can no longer see your lovely face and hear your great voice here on the Rewind Show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been absolutely great being back home on the Rewind Show for sure, and Wildcard Rewind. Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. It's been great fun drafting the best team out of all the teams that were drafted today. So thank you very much. If you want, you can find me over on the Wildcard Dynasty Show as well, on X, Hot Seat Mags, and then Dynasty Hot Seat as well. Hey, if you like some Dynasty Fantasy Football, something I've been doing that's been so much fun. I'm rebuilding the worst Dynasty team that's ever seen the face of the earth, and I'm doing that with the help of the people watching the show. So go check it out, see what you think of the team, leave a comment saying what you think, and that's over on YouTube. You can find it, just type in Dynasty Hot Seat. I'll be right there. Thank you guys.
No, that's awesome, Mags, and the Dynasty Hot Seat show is fantastic. And if anybody's not gone there, get onto YouTube, go and watch it, get subscribing. Mags is criminally underfollowed, and he needs all of those subscriptions on YouTube. So go in there, subscribe, and you'll get all of the next videos straight into your kind of notifications. So go in there and try and help Mags turn around his worst dynasty team, and Deal or No Deal's been great fun recently, so
yes.
I think people need to go and check that out.
Paul
So
managed to get himself a 2027 fourth in Deal or No Deal, by the way. He's the worst performing guest so far.
That sounds about right, to be fair, and that's all by luck. So imagine if he actually tried to do it himself. He'd probably be even worse, wouldn't it, Paul? Unfortunately. But great try. I'm sure potentially if and when we get a chance to get on there, maybe we'll do a bit better. I'm thinking I'll probably get the 101,
I love that you're supposed to be closing the show, and instead you're just taking the piss out of Paul instead.
Yeah.
Well, this is my last chance with both Mags and Lewis here, so I've got to do it while I can. Paul doesn't mind, do you, Paul? It's all in jest. It's
I think
all
Paul's
in
new to
jest.
this. Yeah.
Hashtag anti-bullying.
No, it's all fun and games. We love you, really, Paul. Obviously. Right, we will properly close the show now. So thank you all for joining us. I've had a great time. This has been really good fun. It's been absolutely great. I'm away for the next couple of weeks. I'm on holiday, but Lewis and Paul are going to hold down the fort. While I'm away, I'm sure the boys will play and have a great time. Otherwise, I'll see you all in a few weeks. Over and out.